She went to a party and ended up freezer. Nobody knows how, and the hotel kept silent about it. Her name was Kanika. She was 19 from Chicago, and one night she told her mom that she was going to go bowling with her friends, but instead she goes to a hotel to a party. Her friends call her mom saying that they lost track of her at the party, and her mom's like, wait, what party? They told her that they left Kanika in the hotel hallway while they went to go back to the room to grab her phone and the car keys, and when they came back, she was gone. Her mom, Teresa, she was pissed, yeah, but mostly she was super worried. She rushes to the hotel and she is begging the staff to show her the hotel surveillance footage so that she can find her daughter, but they refuse, and they tell her that she has to file a missing persons report first. So she goes to the police, and guess what they say? You gotta wait a while until she shows up. Like, what? That's giving we don't care. Her family starts banging on the hotel doors, desperate to find her, and instead of helping, the hotel calls the police for disturbing the peace. And when the police finally decide to do their job, it has already been 20 hours. And when they check the cameras, they see Kanika. She's alone, stumbling through the hallways, clearly intoxicated. And then at one point, she wanders into a restricted kitchen area and then just disappears. Hours later, a hotel employee opens that freezer in the same kitchen and finds her body inside. Face down, her left arm is pinched underneath her. She has a shoe that's missing and a cut on her foot. And then her shirt, it is pulled under her jacket, exposing her chest. Now, go ahead and tell me how that's an accident. The one area with no cameras in the exact same place where she ends up that's not a coincidence. That is somebody who knew the layout of that hotel. Someone who knew exactly where the cameras were and weren't. But the police, they still ruled it an accident, said that she just froze to death. But her mom does not believe that. She said, and I quote, "I feel like they helped my child." And honestly, I do too, because if the hotel would have shown that footage from the start, if police hadn't made her wait, maybe Kanika would have been saved. But what do you guys think? Was it an accident or a cover-up?
Her skin was peeled off of her face and just left alone in a field. Christine Lee Silawan was born on March 26 of 2002 and was from the Philippines. Besides being a high school student, she also volunteered at her local church every day from 4 to 6 p.m. On March 10th of 2019, she went to her church per usual, but she never made it home. Her parents started to worry since she never came home, but with the help of their neighbors, they went searching for her and they ended up finding her body on a farm. Christine's skin was completely peeled off, you could only see the skull, and her brain was destroyed by acid. Police were called to investigate and they searched nearby cameras, and as they were looking at that footage, they noticed that Christine was with a guy. They had learned that Christine had broken up with her boyfriend just a week before this had happened, so they brought him into custody. As investigators were looking through Christine's Facebook messages, they saw that she was messaging a person named CJ Diaz, and they were being flirty. They had plans to meet up, but Christine had no idea that this was a fake profile. Just days later, police arrested Christine's 17-year-old ex-boyfriend because they found out that he was the one who made the account so that he could lure Christine to meet up with him after they had broken up. He was jealous, angry, and wanted to confront her. Her ex-boyfriend had even confessed, but since he was a minor and there wasn't enough physical evidence, the charges were dropped and he was released. And out of nowhere, a 42-year-old man named Renato came forward and confessed. He stated that he also used a fake Facebook profile, met up with Christine, and unalived her out of jealousy. Renato even led police to the weapon that he had used, and it matched. He was arrested and charged with murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison.
I've never cried recording my podcast before, but this truly is one of the most devastating accidents I've ever heard of. The full case is out now on the Bourne investigation, but here is why I found this case just so hard to get through. If you guys don't know, in 2009, a fairly young guy called John Jones headed to Utah for Thanksgiving, and him and his brother Josh decided to go cave diving. He went to the Nutty Putty Cave, which is actually supposed to be beginner friendly. People gave it the nickname Nutty Putty Cave because of how the walls were kind of like Play-Doh. You'd almost touch them and be able to kind of mold them into things. So it sounds harmless, right? I mean, John was lulled into a false sense of security. Another heartbreaking fact is that once he was down in the caves, John actually thought he was entering a passage called the birth canal. Now, this was known to be very tight. It kind of had a reputation. People were used to having to squeeze through it to get through. You squeeze your way through the passage and you come out the other side. But John was mistaken. He'd found the wrong passage. He was mistakenly sucking in, thinking, I just need to squeeze a little bit more and then I'll come out the other side. The passage he was squeezing through, though, was a dead end. Now, he kept squeezing forward and forward, assuming it's going to get wider and I'm going to be able to get free. And once he realized he was wrong, he was already too far in. And because of how he was positioned, a piece of rock kind of jutted out and trapped him in almost like a fish hook. He was also head down, which made this whole thing a whole lot worse than it already was. It meant gravity was pulling against him, which not only was making the rescue mission really, really difficult because he would just keep sliding back forward in place, it also meant blood was rushing to his head. And being a medical student meant that John was fully aware of how dangerous it was for his body to be upside down. The stories of the rescuers who risked their own lives to try and save this man honestly broke me. Imagine being able to see somebody, speak to them, and even touch them, and just being powerless. And imagine being John's wife, stood above the ground knowing that your husband is underneath there slowly dying. There was nothing she could do, and the pair had a 1-year-old daughter together, and she was pregnant with their second child. No Way Out, the case of John Jones, is now available on the Bourne investigation.
This might be the most evil serial killer couple in all of history, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Ian Brady was a textbook sociopath who many say was born evil. Unlike most serial killers, Ian Brady never experienced any childhood abuse or any extreme traumatic incidents. As a child, he had a bizarre fascination with World War II for all the wrong reasons, if you know what I mean. He would play war with other neighborhood kids and insist on being the Germans. Very different stuff than when I used to play mermaids. He was always incredibly smart, but he was also very manipulative. He was very distant and very violent. He had a lot of dark interests and he had trouble holding down a job, and it was at one of his many jobs that he met the shy 18-year-old Myra Hindley. Myra was like the exact opposite of Ian. She was very shy, she was very religious, she was a devout Catholic, and people liked Myra. People did not like Ian, except for Myra, because when she met Ian, she became infatuated with him. All of their other coworkers thought that Ian was a weirdo, but Myra thought that his attitude was like mysterious and sexy. Myra would write in her diary like every single day about Ian for like nearly a year, but he never gave her the time of day. He did not care about this like 18-year-old girl who was like clearly obsessed with him. It actually wasn't until they knew each other for over a year that Ian finally asked Myra out, and from there she was hooked. Myra changed everything about herself to be with Ian. She changed her beliefs, the way that she dressed. She stopped going to church. She became mean. She would do anything that he told her to do, and she would believe anything he told her to believe. Like if Ian told Myra that the sky wasn't blue and the sky was actually purple, she would like go to her grave saying that the sky was purple. Myra was obsessed with Ian, but Ian was obsessed with the idea of taking a human life. How they would do it is they would find a child walking alone and have the sweet-seeming young girl Myra lure them into the vehicle with a promise of just giving them a ride. Once they were in the vehicle, Myra would convince the child to help her find an expensive glove that she thought she lost at an area called the moor. But once they got to the moor, Ian would violently essay the child, unalive them before burying them at the site. 16-year-old Pauline Reed was walking to a school dance when she was picked up by Myra. She actually knew Myra because she went to the same school as her younger sister. 12-year-old John Kilbride was walking home from the movies. 12-year-old Keith Bennett was walking to his grandmother's house. And 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey disappeared the day after Christmas from a local fair. All of them were essayed and then unalived by Ian. With their youngest victim, 10-year-old Leslie Ann, Ian actually took photos of her, like CP photos of her first, and then actually made an audio recording of her screaming and begging for her life and begging for her mom while he played Christmas music in the background because it was the day after Christmas. Children from the area were disappearing left and right, and nobody was suspecting Ian and or Myra. They probably could have gotten away with this forever if it hadn't been for Ian when he tried to introduce another partner in crime. Ian and Myra's first victim, 16-year-old Pauline, actually had a boyfriend named David Smith. And because Ian is like such a twisted, messed up individual, after killing David's girlfriend, he tried to befriend David and like manipulate him the same way he had done Myra. He was telling his new buddy David that they were going to commit crimes together, be partners in crime, like they were going to rob banks and stuff. David was only 17 years old, and after his girlfriend Pauline went missing, he was actually a suspect for a while, and then coincidentally married Myra's younger sister. So now he's Myra's brother-in-law. On October 6, 1965, Ian picked up a 17-year-old boy named Edward Evans and then brought him back to him and Myra's house. He introduced his girlfriend Myra as his sister and then instructed Myra to go pick up her brother-in-law and his new best friend David. When David walked into the home, he literally walked in to Ian unaliving Edward. David promised that he would be back in the morning so he could help him bury Edward's body, but the second he got home, he actually threw up and then confessed to his wife about what he had just seen at her sister's house, and then he alerted the police. When they went to the home of Ian and Myra, they of course found Edward's body, but they also found the photos and the recording of the missing 10-year-old girl, Leslie Ann, and then they also found the missing 12-year-old boy, John's name scribbled in one of their notebooks. After doing a search of the moor area, they found the remains of Leslie Ann and John, and then they just stopped searching even though they have 2 other missing children that they know of that disappeared from the same time, same area. I digress. So they charged Ian and Myra with the 3 deaths that they knew of, which they were found guilty on all charges for. It would actually be years until either of them confessed to unaliving Pauline and Keith. But sadly, to this day, the remains of 12-year-old Keith Bennett have never been found, and his own mother would continue to search the moor area for any sign of her missing child until she passed away in 2012. Myra Hindley's involvement in these crimes are still highly debated to this day. She claims that she was only involved in the actual kidnapping of the children, but Ian Brady claims that she was involved in at least 2 of the essays and unalivings. Ian and Myra have both since passed away in prison. It's speculated to this day whether or not there's more victims out there. Ian himself even claimed to have 5 more victims that we just don't know of. A really eerie part of this case is that Ian and Myra would actually go to the moor area all the time, and they would actually pose where they had buried their victims. There's some like really eerie photos just knowing that they're standing on like the burial sites of children. This case fascinates a lot of people, how Myra, who was just a sweet, religious 18-year-old girl, met a boy and then was able to go on to do the most heinous crimes that anyone could ever do. Definitely let me know all your thoughts and theories on this case. Do you think there's more victims out there? What role do you think Myra Hindley really played in these heinous crimes? And while you're in the comment section, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow.
You might want to pause whatever you're doing because the story is actually going to make your soul leave your body, but somehow it ends in the biggest comeback I have ever heard. Her name is Mary Vincent. She was only 15 years old, just a regular teenage girl living a completely normal life in California. Until one day in 1978, she runs away from home like a lot of kids do. Things were a bit rocky between her and her parents, so she decided to hitchhike to her grandfather's house, thinking that she would get there faster if she caught a ride. But the car that had stopped was driven by a literal monster. His name is Lawrence Singleton. Even his name disgusts me. A middle-aged man who looked like someone's dad. He pulls up in a blue van. He waves at Mary and says, "Hey, I'm only going part of the way, but I've got a daughter your age." He looked harmless, so she got in, and it was a pretty long car ride, and so she decided to doze off for a little bit, but when she woke up, she noticed that they were going in the completely opposite direction. She demanded, "Turn around now," and Lawrence acted all innocent, saying, "Oh my god, it was just an honest mistake," and he turns the van back around towards where they're supposed to be going, but then he stops. He tells her he needs to pull over just to pee really quickly. Mary, she steps outside to stretch her legs. She bends down to tie her shoes, and bam! He hits her over the head with a sledgehammer. He then drags her into the van, violently rips off all of her clothes, and SAs her, threatening to unalive her even if she thinks about screaming. Mary is begging, "Let me go," and I swear to you, what he does next still haunts me. He looks her dead in the eyes and says, "You want to be free? I'll set you free." He grabs a hatchet and chops off Mary's left arm and then her right, and she's conscious for all of this, screaming, watching her arm still clutched onto his shirt. I'm sorry, that is freaking insane. But he wasn't done. He picks her up and throws her off of a 30-foot cliff like trash. He leaves her there bleeding out, expecting her to die, but Mary Vincent was not going out like that. Falling in and out of consciousness, she packs mud into her open wounds just to stop the bleeding, and somehow she walks 3 miles back to the highway. She is missing both of her arms, falling over, barely holding on, and a car sees this, but then they ignore her. The second car did at least have a heart. They stop, they save her, and Mary survives. She helps identify her attacker. She testifies against him in court, and this part makes me sick to my stomach. During the trial, this man, this absolute demon, looks at Mary and says, "I'll finish the job even if it takes me the rest of my life." And the justice system, they gave him 14 years, but guess how many years he actually served? 8 years. 4 plus 4. That's what her life was worth to them. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, because after getting out, Lawrence went to unalive someone else, but that's a story for another day. Right now, I want to tell you what happened to Mary. She built a prosthetic arm. She becomes an artist, a mom, a speaker. She turned her pain into purpose and told her story to hundreds of other survivors. As of today, Lawrence Singleton is dead, but Mary Vincent, she is still here, still fighting, still surviving. And I just want to say, Mary, if by some miracle you ever see this video, you are a warrior and your story will never be forgotten, especially by me.
On February 17th of 2025, police received a 911 call reporting an active fire at a residence in Waterbury, Connecticut. When they showed up, they found a 5'9" man who was clearly emaciated. He was 31 years old and only weighed 68 pounds. His hair was matted, his teeth were decaying, and he appeared to be completely disheveled. The man told first responders that he was the reason for the fire. He caused it intentionally to save his own life, and he told them that he had been held captive inside of that house by his stepmother since he was 11 years old. In regards to the case, the Waterbury police chief stated, quote, 33 years of law enforcement. This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed. It's really hard to talk about still, end quote. And I do want to give a heads up here. The person we're talking about today, the person that we are going to be referring as S, we're calling him S because that is what he has chosen to be called. His real name has not and will not be released as he works on rebuilding his life and recovering from all the trauma that he has experienced. So please let's remember that these are real people. These are real people's lives, and please, I know you guys always are, but keep it respectful in the comments. And if I get anything wrong or if there's anything that you want to add, please just comment it down below. When the firefighters showed up at the house, they rescued S from his bedroom and immediately took him to get the medical help that he clearly needed. When speaking to authorities, S told them that the treatment that he had been enduring began when he was only 11 years old, when he was living with his father, Craig Sullivan, and his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan. He told authorities that from that age, he began being locked in a small room with no heat, no air conditioning for the majority of his days. He would be let out at times, but he was given limited food and water, and by the 4th grade, he remembers having to scavenge for food at night, which only made his parents angrier. And in 2004, there were complaints made to law enforcement and to the State Department of Children and Families by school staff that saw just how small and tiny this boy looked. Not only was he extremely small, but he looked to be sickly thin. That resulted in wellness checks to the house. However, whatever was going on inside of that house at that time went completely undetected because it was ruled that the house was found to be clean and in a lived-in condition. And to authorities, everything seemed fine, but not long after, in 2002, S was pulled out of school completely, his parents claiming that he was going to be homeschooled from now on. And from what I could find, S hardly stepped foot outside of that house again, and if he did, it was only a matter of time in which he would no longer be allowed to. By his teenage years, S recalls being locked in his storage room, and his parents over time kept adding additional locks to the door. He said that he was in this locked room for 22 to 24 hours each day. And search warrants later revealed plywood and locks added on his bedroom door, matching up with everything that he had stated. He was being fed 2 sandwiches a day, an egg salad or tuna or peanut butter sandwich, and hardly any water. And to relieve himself, he made a homemade funnel looking thing. It was essentially straws all attached together, leading out to a hole in the window. He wasn't allowed to shower, so he would sometimes save some of the water that was his daily ration to be able to over time bathe himself, even though he didn't have any soap. All he had was water. In 2024, S's father passed away, leaving him and his stepdad living in the house alone. And he claims that things only got worse from that point on. He claims that the only time that he would be allowed out of the house once his father passed was to let the family dog out in the back of the property. And according to the affidavit, that was around 1 minute a day. And then after decades of horror, S finally saw light at the end of the tunnel when he found a lighter in one of his father's old jacket, and using printer paper and hand sanitizer as fuel, he used it to start the fire and set himself free. S's biological mom gave custody of him up when he was only 6 months old, and at the time she said that she thought she was doing the right thing. She thought that being with his father was a safe space for him to be, but that wasn't the case. Today, S is working hard to recover from everything that he has been through, not only physically but also psychologically and emotionally, and his biological mother has released a statement saying, quote, "When he is healthier and he's stronger, if he wants a relationship with me, I am right here. I'm not going anywhere." His stepmother, 56-year-old Kimberly Sullivan, was arrested but released on a $300,000 bond. She claims that S's story is completely fabricated and she is maintaining her innocence, pleading not guilty. As of now, it sounds like she remains under house arrest and has been ordered by a judge to wear an electronic GPS monitor device while she is still out on bail. But there was a pre-trial hearing on Tuesday, July 8th that just passed, and Kimberly did not show up. She has been ordered by a judge to show up to court on the scheduled date of August 19th. So I guess we'll see if she shows up. And I want to end this video with a statement made by S's spokesperson. It says, quote, "I am a survivor of more than 20 years of captivity and I was held prisoner in my own home from the time that I was taken out of the 4th grade at age 11 until 2 months ago at age 31, when I purposefully set the fire that helped set me free. I am speaking out today to begin the process of reclaiming my life and to have my say in how my story is told." Yeah. Insane story, but that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let me know your thoughts on this case, because insane, and also what a weird thing to think that this could be happening next door to you. Anyway, hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
She accidentally said the wrong name in the bedroom, so he ripped out her insides. 31-year-old Marie Nemeth was from Peru, and she was described as kind and hardworking. She got divorced from her husband of 8 years and wanted to build a new life for herself. That's when Maria met 25-year-old Fidel Lopez at a nightclub. Fidel was born in Cuba, worked in construction, and was described as quiet, reserved, but deeply attached to Maria. After a year of dating, the couple decided to move in together in an apartment in Sunrise, Florida. On September 19th of 2015, Fidel had just finished his shift at a truck stop where he worked and went home to help Maria with dinner. The couple then went to visit Fidel's mother in Miami, and according to her, they seemed very happy and in love. After the visit, Maria and Fidel went to a restaurant to have margaritas, and then after that, they went to a liquor store to buy a large bottle of tequila. They headed home and proceeded to take some shots, and quickly they became intoxicated. The evening had been going pretty well until something changed. Fidel had called the police claiming that his girlfriend was having trouble breathing. Once police arrived to the apartment, there was blood splatter all over the walls and a large amount seeping from the floor of the closet. As police were investigating closer, they found several chunks of what appeared to be human body tissue near the closet. Holes had been smashed into the walls, glass had been shattered all over the floor, and a glass sliding door had been smashed. At 4:02 a.m., Maria was pronounced dead, and her cause of death was because of blood loss. Her organs had been ripped out of her body. Fidel was quickly taken into custody and interrogated, and during the interrogation, he admitted to investigators that he was enraged. He broke the glass sliding door and punched holes into the walls. He and Maria had an argument, but he claimed that he didn't remember what it was about, so they made up, and then they decided that they were going to have rough intimacy in the closet. He told investigators that Maria had asked him to insert a beer bottle inside of her, and to make her happy, he did it. He then said that Maria needed to throw up, so she went to the bathroom. So meanwhile, Fidel went to go smoke a cigarette, and when he came back, he went to the bathroom to check on her, and that's when he noticed that she wasn't breathing. And after that is when Fidel called 911. Investigators were suspecting that this was a sex act gone wrong. Not only was a beer bottle inserted in Maria, but also coat hangers, a flashlight, and hair straighteners. Detectives went to speak with a medical examiner, and they stated that Maria's intestines were pulled from her vaginal cavity, and that's when those objects were inserted. After this revelation, Fidel finally confessed what happened that night. He told detectives that Maria had told him that she may be moving back to Peru and he wouldn't be able to use the car to get to work. Fidel was frustrated by this, so he started throwing things in the room, but once he calmed down, him and Maria started to have intercourse. While they were being intimate, Maria called out her ex-husband's name twice. Fidel was blinded by rage and wanted to punish Maria in the worst ways possible. Fidel began destroying anything in the home that he could, and then returned to Maria and started inserting foreign objects inside of her. At this point, Maria was too weak to fight him off, so Fidel inserted his arm, reached deep inside, and took out her intestines and body tissue. Maria never regained consciousness, and Fidel claimed that he went to go wash his hands and arms and then went out to go smoke a cigarette. In 2017, Fidel accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This is the case of serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. This might be one of the most messed up true crime cases I've ever read. I mean, obviously, he's one of the most notorious serial killers of all time, but the details in this case are so disturbing and terrifying. But this case does have one of the most satisfying ways I've ever read of a serial killer getting caught and arrested. Richard's father was a hard-working Christian man, but he was also an alcoholic, very angry and very abusive. When Richard was 2 years old, he experienced a traumatic, serious head injury, and then only 3 years later, he experienced a second serious head trauma at age 5. But by the time he's only 5 years old, we have two of the biggest components in like the recipe of what creates a serial killer: abuse and head trauma, but it only gets worse. When Richard was about 12 years old, he began escaping his father's abuse and anger by spending as much time as possible with his older cousin Mike. Cousin Mike was a celebrated veteran after serving in the Vietnam War. Okay, so quick history lesson. A lot of American soldiers, not all, but a lot of American soldiers did a lot of evil things to Vietnamese female citizens during the Vietnam War, like assault, SA, and unaliving them. And Mike was one of those American soldiers. Turns out evil runs in the family. Cousin Mike would show photos to Richard that he had taken of the women that he essayed and unalived while he was serving in Vietnam. Many of the women in these photos would be missing a body part, typically their head. Cousin Mike told the 12-year-old Richard that he did that to the women after he unalived them because the people of Vietnam believed that if you lost a limb or like a body part after death, that you would not be able to go to heaven because he's seriously such a messed up individual. And 12-year-old Richard did not think that this was disturbing or gross or cruel. He thought it was cool. He looked up to his older cousin Mike. And then one day, right in front of the young Richard, cousin Mike shot and unalived his wife during an argument. And cousin Mike was found not guilty by reason of insanity for this, spent only 4 years in a mental hospital before being released back into society. Richard is now 13 going on 14, and he's living with his sister and his sister's husband, and his brother-in-law was like an obsessed peeping Tom. So he would take the young teenage boy Richard out with him at night to look in the windows of like his pretty neighbors. It was around this time that Richard, who's 14 years old, got his first part-time job working at a hotel, and he would use the master key at the hotel to break into the hotel guests' rooms and just steal anything of value. It was when he was 14 working at this hotel that he broke into the hotel room of a married couple, attempted to essay the wife, but was beaten up really badly by her husband. But the couple did not press charges, and 14-year-old Richard was free to go. As a young adult, he moved to California, where he became the Night Stalker that we all know and hate today. His first known victim was a little 9-year-old girl. It was in 1984. This little 9-year-old girl was looking on the street for $1 that she thought she lost. And Richard came up to her and said that he knew where her missing money went, and he lured her into the basement of an apartment complex where he assaulted her, essayed her, and then unalived her. Sadly, this case would go unsolved for over 20 years as it was not linked to Richard until 2009. And it was after this crime that Richard Ramirez started his 14-month-long killing spree in LA and other parts of California. About 6 months into his killing spree, he was arrested for stealing a car. He spent about 1 month in prison for this, but it was this mugshot that eventually led to his downfall. I think the thing that was particularly terrifying about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, compared to other serial killers is that Richard Ramirez did not have a type when it came to his victims. To the Night Stalker, it didn't matter your gender, your age, your race, or how much money you had. No one was safe when Richard Ramirez decided he was going to break into your house that night. Richard Ramirez would typically hunt during the weekends. It would always be in the middle of the night. He would break into any home. It was completely random. He would rob the house of anything of value, essay any women that were in the house, and then typically unalive or attempt to unalive anybody in the home. And then he began to escalate his crimes in even more disturbing ways, whether it was drawing a pentagram on the wall or taking a woman's eyes as a trophy. First, it was only LA, and everyone in LA knew who the serial killer, the Night Stalker was, and they were all terrified that he would come into their house in the middle of the night. So what does Richard Ramirez do? He begins targeting other cities outside of LA. He wanted the entire state of California terrified of him. It was in one of those other cities that he broke into the home of a young engaged couple that were soon to be married. He shot the man 3 times and then repeatedly essayed the woman named Inez. And then after this, he left her alive and told her to tell them that you just met the Night Stalker. I think that he did this because he wanted the media to link this crime and his other crimes outside of LA to the ones in LA. He wanted everyone to know and be terrified that he could strike anytime, anywhere. But it would be this decision that would lead to his arrest, because now they knew what he looked like, and then they found his fingerprints, and then they had his name. Richard Ramirez was the Night Stalker. And by the next morning, his mugshot was on the front page of every newspaper in California. Now I get to tell you about the most satisfying way a serial killer has ever been caught and arrested. Richard Ramirez boarded a bus to LA with no idea that now everyone knows who he is. Once he gets off the bus in LA, very quickly people recognize him. They begin staring at him, they're whispering, they're pointing at him, and then someone says, "That's him. That's the Night Stalker." Richard Ramirez, he tries to flee, he just starts running, but multiple regular old citizens are just on the street, start chasing him down the street, and they're telling other people as they pass by, "That's the guy." This is the guy that for over a year had been terrorizing their city and killing their citizens. And now there's a mob of them all chasing after him down the street. And then they catch him and then they start wailing on him. There's like over 100, I think several hundred people now surrounding him, and multiple of them have him on the ground and they're hitting him and they're kicking him and just pounding on him. Some local police officers try to go and break up this fight. Well, it's not really a fight, he's just getting jumped. And then they realize that the guy who's getting jumped is the Night Stalker. During his trial, he had a lot of fans. He was like a celebrity. He had a lot of groupies, a lot of females who thought that he was attractive. He was getting hundreds of letters like a day. He was getting multiple marriage proposals, similar to Ted Bundy and now more recently Wade Wilson. This is such a weird epidemic, and we talked about it recently, how women become obsessed with these killers. If you're one of them, you're weird and you need to stop. Richard Ramirez was being charged with the deaths of 13 people and the attempted unaliving of 5 more. This is for the crimes that they had concrete proof that he did commit in LA, but it is believed that his victim count is more probably in the 20s or even the 30s. But he was found guilty of all of these charges and sentenced to death. But he actually passed away behind bars before his execution in 2013 at the age of 53 years old after 23 years on death row. I told you guys that this case was going to be wild from start to finish. I mean, did I lie? You guys have been asking me to cover this case on Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, since I started posting true crime back in January. Typically, I try to cover cases that are a little bit less well known, but you guys have been asking me to cover this case and some of the other more notorious serial killers in history for such a long time. So if you want me to do, for maybe the next 2 weeks, cover some of the more well-known notorious serial killers in history, let me know in the comments. Let me know all your thoughts on this case. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.
This is the story of Maxwell Anderson. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, April 2nd, 2024. At around 7:30 a.m., the police responded to a car that was on fire in the area of West Lisbon Avenue and North 29th Street. The witness who made the call told the police that she saw a white male with a dark gray hoodie and a tan backpack get out of the driver's seat and throw a match in the car as he walked away. At around 5:30 p.m. on that same day, the police got another strange call from a man who's found a severed leg that washed up to shore at Warney Mount Park. The police had their hands full on April 2nd, but it wasn't over yet, because around 9 p.m. a young lady walked into the Milwaukee police station reporting her friend missing. She says she had been texting and calling her since yesterday, but not getting any answer. She said the last time she seen her friend active was when she was on Snapchat at a bar called Duke's on Water the evening before. The next day on April 3rd, the police go to 19-year-old Sade Robinson's apartment to conduct a welfare check on her. When they seen that Sade was not there, they decided to ask around the apartment complex. They talked to a lady that worked at the apartments, and she said that she talks to Sade frequently and that the last time she talked to her was on April 1st. And Sade had told her that she was excited about a date that she had planned that day. The police asked, what kind of car do Sade drive? A 2020 Honda Civic, the same car that was found in a blaze yesterday morning. That's when the police decided to contact Verizon Wireless to pull them phone records. And that told it all. The last known number was from 33-year-old Maxwell Anderson. The two were setting up a date around 5 p.m. to meet up at a restaurant called Twisted Fisherman, which is where Maxwell used to work. When the two left the restaurant, they went to Duke's on Water. Now, Duke's didn't have cameras on the inside, but you can see the two getting out the car in the parking lot. At around 9:30, Maxwell's neighbor's surveillance camera caught the two going inside of Maxwell's house. Sade's phone also pinged off the tower near Maxwell's house. The phone did not leave until around 1 a.m. On April 4th, the police went to Maxwell's house with a search warrant. Maxwell was there, and what the police found: blood on the sheets, blood on the wall in the bedroom, blood on the wall leading to the basement. Maxwell was arrested on the spot, but claimed he was innocent. On April 6th, a severed foot was found in the area where Sade's car was burned, and a few days later, a torso and an arm washed up along Lake Michigan. With forensics and the help of Sade's family, all body parts were confirmed to be her. Sade's phone pinged off of every tower where her body parts was found until it died at around 4:30 a.m. on April 2nd. It was found burnt and broken in her car, along with the clothes she had on that day. The witness that described a white male setting Sade's car on fire and walking away, she described him to a T, because here is Maxwell in 4K on a bus in a dark gray hoodie and tan backpack after he set Sade's car on fire. In Maxwell's photo gallery, which he tried to delete, by the way, was a picture of Sade, who was clearly unconscious and half clothed. It was another picture of him holding up one of her breasts, her severed breast. Maxwell Anderson was charged with first-degree intentional murder, mutilating a corpse, and arson. With all this overwhelming evidence, he still pled not guilty of these charges. On August 1st, 2025, Maxwell Anderson was found guilty of all charges. Now, he's never said what really happened to Sade. Speculating, they think that he invited her back to his place, drugged her, and sexually assaulted her, killed her, and then dismembered her. All of Sade's remains still have not been found. I don't know if this is a picture of a search team or just her people, but they're out there still trying to find the rest of her body. Condolences to this family, because doing this, I cannot even imagine. But that's not it, y'all. The blood that was found in Maxwell's bed, on his wall, and on the wall leading to the basement was not Sade's. It's speculation that Maxwell is not a first-time killer. Jonah Walker, who is 15 and disappeared on June 23rd of 2022 in the same area as Sade. Now, it's unclear of who blood that is in Maxwell's house, but detectives seem to think that he just might have something to do with Jonah's disappearance as well. Boy, you got life. Tell them folks who blood that is. Yellow Tape, what y'all think?
The fact that you can murder your own child and only get 25 years is insane to me. I'm talking about this man right here, Christopher Greger, and how he forced his 6-year-old son to run at such high speeds on a treadmill that he died from it. This happened in 2021, but the trial for this case just took place, and it revealed some awful things, like a video taken from the gym at Christopher's apartment complex showing the abuse. In April of 2021, 6-year-old Corey Michelow was staying with his dad Christopher at his home in Stafford Township, New Jersey. At the time, Christopher and Corey's mom Brianna were not together and they didn't live together, but they shared custody of him. Brianna didn't want him to go to Christopher's house because she suspected that he was being severely abused by him. For a quick backstory, Christopher met Brianna when she was only 15 and he was 21, so he already wasn't a good person. Now at the time, she had more than enough evidence to suspect that little Corey was being abused, and she even reported this to authorities more than 100 times over a span of 18 months, but nothing was ever done. Just 5 days before his death, Corey's grandma on his mom's side was giving him a bath and saw that he was covered in bruises, some that were fresh and others that were trying to heal. Corey then asked his grandma, quote, "Does God see what my daddy does to me?" In which she replied, "God sees everything." Corey then asked, quote, "Why doesn't he help me?" That same day, he wrote, "I died" in chalk near the front door of the house. His grandma says that Corey knew nobody could help him and that he knew he was going to die and accepted it. Fast forward 5 days, which is the day that he was taken to his dad's house. Corey's grandma gave him her cell phone and told him to hide it and to call her not if, but when his dad starts beating him. Corey told her that his dad was always around and couldn't use the phone or even run to a neighbor's house. Corey died that day, and what's incredibly tragic are the events that led up to his death, which you'll see in the next video, so just a heads up. Just before he died, video footage from the gym at Christopher's apartment complex showed him forcing Corey to run on the treadmill. He kept increasing the speed, which made Corey fall off at least 6 times, and at one point, Christopher is seen biting Corey's head out of anger. Corey went into cardiac arrest twice, so Christopher took him to the hospital where he died just an hour later. The autopsy says that Corey died from blunt force trauma and lacerations to his heart and liver, and all of this came as a result from his dad's abuse. Just 20 minutes after Corey died, Christopher took off and drove to Arkansas, and the only reason he came back is because his parents talked him into it. What's sickening is the fact that he didn't even tell Corey's mom Brianna which hospital he took him to, so she couldn't even spend the final moments with her own son. Christopher wasn't arrested until a year after his son's death. During the trial, it was argued that he inflicted those blunt force injuries to punish Corey because his mom was 14 hours late dropping him off. He was recently found guilty of manslaughter and the endangerment of a child. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for manslaughter and 5 years for child endangerment. Right before sentencing, he said that although his actions are inexcusable, he still denies any responsibility for his son's death. He said he thought Corey was just tired and that's why he didn't take him to the hospital sooner. Prosecutors wanted him to have the max sentence, which would have been 40 years. But the judge said that because of his limited criminal history, he was ineligible for that. According to New Jersey law, he's required to serve at least 85% of his sentence before being considered for parole. What's so infuriating is the fact that just one day before Corey was murdered, Brianna took him to the doctor so that they could document that he was being abused. She did this because shortly before his death, she filed for an emergency application for full custody because of the abuse, but she was denied. She was denied partly for her past with drug addiction, but she had gotten clean for Corey and was doing everything she could to try and help him, but nobody would, and now it's too late. Corey deserved better.
He committed 2 of the most heinous crimes in Scottish history, and yet he is just being released from incarceration. He is now a free man. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of John and Irene McMonigal. This case takes place in Govan, Glasgow in January 1976. The McMonigal family consisted of the father, John, and then his 3 children, John Jr., Irene, and Liz. 13-year-old John was a popular young boy who enjoyed football, and 12-year-old Irene was as caring as they came. She aspired to be a nurse when she grew older, and growing up as the older sister to little Liz, she was very much the mother hen. She always looked after Liz and looked out for her entire family. She was just caring in nature like that. The McMonigals lived in a flat on Golspie Street, but they were going to be moving soon, and they were so excited because where they were moving, it was going to be a bit of a bigger space for them. In January 1976, the dad, John, decided to take little Liz with him to this new place while they were moving some of the odds and ends preparing for the move. Where they were moving wasn't too far away from where they currently were, and so knowing that they weren't going to be out long, Father John decided to leave John and Irene behind. When they returned, they would walk into a scene that has been described as a scene of absolute horror. Young John and Irene had both been tied up, gagged, and then beaten to death with a hammer. It was also later confirmed that Irene had been indecently assaulted. Upon seeing his 2 children in this state, Father John desperately and frantically tried to save them, but it was too late. They were gone. The double murders horrified Glasgow and Scotland as a country. A huge investigation ensued to try and catch the killer. The violence within this crime indicated that he was someone that may strike again. Over 200 detectives worked all around the clock, 12, 13, 14-hour shifts, following up on tips, following up on leads, and conducting interviews. Over 3,000 houses in the nearby areas were searched, and a newspaper even put up a £1,000 reward for information. According to the Bank of England's inflation calculator, that would work out at over 65 grand today. Investigators became interested in one man specifically. That man was 29-year-old Alexander Miller, someone that was known to the police. He had previously been in trouble for petty crimes including theft, but he was also known for his violence. He would be arrested and charged with the double murders in May of that year. At the High Court, he was charged with murder. However, he pled guilty to culpable homicide on the ground of diminished responsibility. This was due to his mental health. He stated that he had only broken into the McGonagall's flat in order to steal a TV and instead committed an absolutely devastating and sadistic crime against 2 defenceless children. This plea was accepted and he was ordered to be detained without a limit of time. He spent 49 years within secure mental health facilities and psychiatric units, where he was technically a patient, not a prisoner. Much to the upset and distress of the McGonagall family, a now 78-year-old Alexander Miller has been released. He's been described as being in a frail state. He can't move about by himself. He would need the assistance of staff members to get from A to B, and he uses a Zimmer frame. It's believed that he has been placed somewhere in the south of England. It would have been impossible to let him out in Glasgow because everyone still remembers the heinous crimes. It is rumoured that he has been free for around about 6 months now. However, the news has only recently broke out, much to the distress of Liz McMonigal. She suffers with PTSD, anxiety, and as unlikely as it seems, she fears that Alexander Miller might come back for her, for her children, or even her grandchildren. She describes him as, quote, an absolute animal.
She survived a vicious attack that went viral and bravely spoke out, but had no idea she wouldn't survive what came next. It was April 2019 in Dallas, Texas. Malaysia Booker was a stunning 22-year-old transgender woman. She was funny, full of life, really the kind of girl that you would want around if you were feeling down. She would definitely cheer you up. But on the 12th of the month, she was just minding her own business, trying to park in an apartment car park. She accidentally bumped into somebody else's car. I don't know if anybody else has had this happen before. I certainly have. I reversed into my neighbour's car, and honestly, your stomach just drops. It's so horrible. You feel bad enough as it is, without a group of men coming up to you, surrounding you and attacking you. What kind of men do this? Honestly, it's so gross to me. A big crowd gathered round to watch these men just attacking this woman. And instead of going to get help, they filmed it. What is wrong with people? She was beaten so viciously, she had a concussion and a broken wrist. And this video started going viral on social media, and some sick people were kind of sharing it like, look, this is so funny, but others were obviously outraged. And when she finally recovered, she did bravely speak out about hate crimes and the fact that these men were actually using transphobic slurs. She was hoping that speaking out and bravely sharing her story would make a change. In fact, what was to come was much, much worse. Edward Thomas, the kind of ringleader, the man who attacked her, was charged with aggravated assault, but later only convicted of the lesser charge of misdemeanor assault and given just 300 days in prison. More days in prison than brain cells. And when she just finally managed to recover, tragedy struck. On the 18th of May, police were called to an incident on Valley Glen Drive at around 6:40 a.m. When they got there, they couldn't believe their eyes. He was just lying face down in the middle of the street, and she was very clearly deceased. Now, at first they were like, oh my God, we need to find out who this is so her family can be told and we can get on with this investigation. But she had no ID on her at all. She had to be transported away from the scene and a medical examiner had to identify her the following day. It was Malaysia. Now, obviously, police knew one thing for sure, a dangerous murderer was on the loose. Her cause of death was a gunshot wound and Malaysia had been spotted getting into a particular car, which was key to the investigation. The car was a light-coloured Lincoln. Now, this matched the car of local man Kendrell Lyles. He was actually the suspect already in other shootings. Yes, shootings plural. When they searched his phone, they found that the data showed it had pinged in the exact same location that Malaysia was found dead. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he was also found to have Malaysia's phone on him. Now, he was arrested and charged with her murder as well as the 2 other killings. These were Letitia Grant and Kenneth Chichoki, and these were unrelated. He ended up pleading guilty to Malaysia's murder, and although it's never been confirmed his actual motive, people strongly believe there was a transphobia element to it. He was given 48 years in prison, and I really hope Malaysia didn't die in vain. We need to keep talking about the very real violence that trans people are facing. Silence protects perpetrators, not victims.
He joked that he regretted marrying his wife on the TV show Family Fortunes, and only 4 years later, she would be murdered.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do.
I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Becky Bleefnick. Rebecca and Timothy Bleefnick married in 2009 after meeting at university. The couple would go on to have 3 sons, and Becky actually left her job within the medical sales sector so that she could be at home full-time with the children. She was described as a selfless woman who would do anything for anyone. Her sons were the centre of her universe. She absolutely adored them, and she did everything for them. She was the type of person who loved to make people feel seen and special and included. She was described as bright, bubbly and fun. The Bleefnick family all lived together in Quincy, Illinois. Becky and Tim were like the picture perfect married couple. They appeared to be so happy and madly in love. In 2019 went on to Family Fortunes, although I think it's called Family Feud in America, where he had this interaction.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
The joke was laughed off at the time. However, only 2 years after this episode aired, Tim would file for divorce. The marriage between the couple had become extremely strained. Becky felt like Tim wasn't pulling his weight and that everything was being left for her to deal with. She had to do everything within the house and to do with the children, which was incredibly stressful. He didn't support her when she decided that she wanted to go back to university and retrain to become a nurse. They argued over everything from financial issues to infidelity to custody of the children. While the divorce proceedings were going through, they separated, they began living in different houses, and they shared custody of the 3 boys. During this time, however, strange things started happening to Becky. She began worrying because she was hearing voices in her backyard late at night. CCTV footage from a neighbour's house would show that what appeared to be a man was stalking Becky's home in the middle of the night, and this was happening in the weeks leading up to the murder. On one occasion, this man showed up at Becky's house on Valentine's Day, where he would have seen Becky's new boyfriend's car parked on her drive. She would text one of her friends describing an altercation that happened between herself and Tim, which read, quote, "He has screamed in my face. He shoved me in front of the kids and has thrown things across the room." And chillingly, almost as if she knew that her life was in danger, she texted her sister saying, quote, "I am putting this in writing that I'm fearful he will somehow harm me, come after me, or will try to do something to me that takes me away from the kids or the kids away from me." On the 23rd of February 2023, Becky asked Tim if he could keep their children, who he had had sleeping over the night before, at his home, only around about a mile away, because on this evening she wasn't feeling very well. And Tim said yes. Shortly after 1 a.m, an intruder, who we now know was Tim, would scale the side of Becky's house. while walking across her roof. He would walk past 3 bedroom windows. One of these windows would lead into Becky's bedroom where she was sleeping, but the window that he decided to go into was the bedroom window of one of their sons, a room that he knew was empty. If this was just a random intruder, why would he walk 3 windows away to get to a specific window? He got into the house by likely prying open the window using a crowbar. He then made his way to Becky's bedroom door, which he forcefully broke down by kicking it in and then chased a terrified Becky to the bathroom. Raising his hand, he then pointed a gun, a 9mm handgun, very similar to one that Becky had bought him for his birthday only a couple of years prior, and proceeded to shoot 41-year-old Becky 14 times at close range. Some of the shots being fired into her as she lay on the floor bleeding to death. Becky's body would be discovered the following morning by her dad, and her dad only went over to her house because Tim had texted him saying that he couldn't get in touch with Becky. He had set up her father to find his daughter's dead body. When police began investigating the murder, of course, the first person that they were suspicious of was the estranged husband, and only 2 weeks after Becky's death, Tim would be arrested and charged with Becky's murder. During the investigation, they uncovered a decent amount of evidence against him, and this evidence included some shady Google searches. He had searched things such as, quote, "How to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, and how to clean gunpowder off your hands." DNA that was taken from underneath Becky's fingernails weren't a perfect match to Tim, but this DNA came from someone within his family tree. On Valentine's Day, the day that the stalker went to Becky's house and saw Becky's new boyfriend's car on the drive, after the camera caught this stalker leaving Becky's home, only a short time later, Tim would go onto Google and started doing research on the new boyfriend's registration plate. That is just a fraction of the evidence that was found. In August 2023, Timothy Bleethnick would be convicted of the murder of Becky Bleethnick. He would be handed a sentence of life imprisonment, and since his time behind bars, he has profusely denied his involvement, claiming that he is innocent.
Head teacher SAs his students, both male and female, for his entire career. Like, how does it feel, Neil? How does it feel to be so unhappy with yourself, so incapable of feeling anything good that you have to go out of your way and ruin people's lives, give other people trauma, young girls trauma, in order to be able to feel anything for yourself? How does it feel to be so disgusting and despicable that you have to mask who you really are as a person? Disgusting. Neil Foden was born and raised in North Wales, and he was a husband and a father of 2. After graduating college, he got a job working as an English teacher, and the education field is where he would continue to work for the remainder of his career. Neil has been described as having a, quote, arrogant, controlling personality, and by the way that he acted, you would think that it was something that he was really proud of. He definitely had the my way or the highway mentality, and he thought that he could just walk around this world and do whatever he pleased. He was extremely disrespectful, not only towards his students, but also to his fellow teachers, and some of his colleagues have described him as a strict, commanding head teacher, known for his firm leadership style. Some have even labeled him to be a bully due to his harsh disciplinary methods and controlling demeanor that he carried around with him. And because being arrogant and condescending wasn't enough, he was also, on top of that, extremely creepy towards his female students. Neil used his role as a head teacher to target vulnerable female students in a way that went beyond any professional or personal boundaries. He wanted to spend time alone with them, he wanted to single them out, and he offered them special attention. He would arrange meetings after school to try and get them alone with the sole purpose of creating situations that always left the girls feeling uncomfortable. His actions took advantage of the authority and the trust that he was supposed to have as a teacher, and he absolutely crossed every single line of a proper teacher-student relationship. And by doing so, he caused serious harm to those involved. And we're talking about his entire career here. This was all the way from his early 20s to his 60s, but believe it or not, it only got worse and worse. It started off by him just standing a little bit too close to his female students. He would lean over a little bit too far when he was talking to them at their desks, staring at them and making comments about the way that they looked, to then physically making physical contact with them and leaning over them, rubbing their arms and then their chest and breathing into their necks. Then it progressed to him asking them to stay after class, and he wanted to make them feel vulnerable, right? So he would ask them about their home life, about their personal life, their friends, their family, what made them sad, what made them happy. And when he would learn that their life at home was rough, he would want to act like a mentor, almost like, oh, I'm just here to help you. You're too pretty to be upset. You're too attractive to be sad. And then he would start putting his hands on them, on their thighs, on their shoulders, too close to their chest, pretending that what he was doing was just comforting them. In the 90s, he becomes head teacher for an entire high school, and then he eventually becomes a super head teacher. So he was head teacher for 2 high schools. And what did he do with his power? He used it for all of the wrong reasons, to cover up the true version of himself that is an absolute monster. His behavior was always vile, but it only kept progressing. He began watching extremely disturbing material online, if you know what I mean, from his school laptop, at his school desk, at his place of work. And then it turned from doing things on school premises to then outside. One of his students that was 15 to 16 years old, mind you, Neil is now in his late 50s, but one of his female students really caught his attention and the things that he did to this poor girl. He began singling her out. He began asking her to stay alone with him after class, asking her about her personal life, and she was actually having a really hard time at home, so school was her safe space, meaning that she trusted Neil Foden to be a safe person for her, but he was everything but. Neil would call this student into his office and he would pretend like he was comforting her when she started opening up about her struggles, and then he would start rubbing her arms, rubbing her thighs higher and higher each time. He would hug her in a ridiculously tight embrace and not let her go, and then he started kissing her on the cheek, and then he started kissing her on the lips. He would buy her gifts like clothing or purses or jewelry or shoes, and he would email her all the time, every single day. And he had done this before also, by the way. I have no way of really knowing how many victims he had, but I can imagine that it was a lot. And again, he purposefully and everything that he did was intentionally. He went after the girls that he found to be vulnerable. So not only are they a bit confused as to what they're supposed to be feeling because they're so young, but they're also being completely manipulated and told time and time again that Neil acted the way that he did because he cared about them, because he wanted to be someone that they could trust, and he would manipulate them into thinking that everything that he was doing was normal and in their best interest. And the girls usually didn't have many family members or many friends, so they would keep everything to themselves, and the only voice that they had whispering things into their ear was Neil. One day, he offered a different 16-year-old student a ride home after class, and in the car, he reached over, put his hand on her thigh, and moved it up until he was you-know-where, and kept it there for 15 to 20 minutes. And then this became routine, and he would keep giving her rides, and each time he would push it farther and farther until eventually they went all the way. And this girl had never done it before. This was her first experience with him. And this is disgusting, okay? Neil also had a thing for urine, so he would make this girl drink a ton of water, and then they would be engaging in these acts in his car, and he would push down on her bladder for her to relieve herself because it was something that he was into. He then started bringing this student along with him on work trips, and he would keep her basically locked away in the hotel room for him to return to after he was done with his workday, and then he would SA her over and over again. But to this student, he was so good at brainwashing people and manipulating them. He would make her believe that he was in love with her, and in return, she started to maybe think that she was in love with him too, that she wanted this. He would talk badly about his wife and say that he was so grateful to have her because he wasn't happy in his marriage, so he was so thankful that they could have a thing going on, until eventually he started telling the girl that he loved her, brainwashing her completely. And by the way, as far as the other teachers, I don't know how many reports there were, but I know that there were some reports, like complaints made, but those complaints would go up and end up on Neil's desk. And because he was the head teacher, he was buddies with every single person in every higher position. So they would just brush the complaints underneath the carpet and pretend that they never happened. They had the power to ignore them, and they did. Then there was another student, also under the age of 16, who he did the exact same thing to. He started to single her out, calling her to his office for one-on-ones. Then he would hug her and not let her go. He would hug her from behind and breathe down her neck and then start kissing it. And then it progressed and progressed until he started sliding his hand in places that he shouldn't be. And that poor girl, that girl has said that every single time that it happened, if she tried to leave, he would just hug her tighter until she calmed down. And she said that she just started having to disassociate because it was so traumatizing to her that the only way that she could deal with it was to literally pretend that she was somewhere else while it was happening. And this girl has said that Neil Foden completely destroyed her mental health. By 2023, Neil was 65 years old, and finally the walls would come crashing down around him. In September of 2023, one of his victims was at her breaking point. She could not take it any longer. She had a very similar stories as all the other victims did as well. And she confided in a different teacher and told her everything that Neil Foden had been doing to her. The head teacher, she was crying hysterically when trying to explain everything. She was telling her about how it had been going on for 6 months at that point, about how Neil tried to convince her that they were in a relationship together, about how he told her that she was never allowed to tell anyone about them, about how he made her save his phone number under a fake name on her phone, and she had hundreds of texts as proved. The teacher was mortified and she immediately went to the police station, and finally on September 6th of 2023, Neil Foden was arrested at school. Once this came out, more and more victims came to the police to tell their stories about Neil. The girls who sat down and gave a full detailed story about what they suffered were girl A, B, C, D, and E, and they also all testified against him in trial. And in trial, he was truly pitiful. He was coming up with the most ridiculous excuses that you have literally ever heard that made no sense. For example, when some of his disgusting messages were shown, he would blame some of the things that he said as a typo. Like, he was saying filthy things and he would say, oh, I didn't mean to write that, it was a typo. And he would say that he was trying to say a different word and that the phone corrected him. Like, literally the excuses he was throwing out flat out did not make any sense to anyone. He painted himself out to be the fool that he was. The jury found Neil Foden guilty of 19 charges. Get this, he was only sentenced to 17 years, eligible for parole in 12 years, which is a joke of his sentence because what do you mean? When he was sentenced, the judge said, quote, "You felt like no one would stand up to you. You believed the victims would never disclose. It is clear that were it not for the courage of the victims and support offered by their families and the thoroughness of the investigation by police, there is every possibility you would have continued to offend. You have no remorse, not shown an ounce of contrition, and have no insight into the very serious harm that you have caused." End quote. 17 years is crazy though. What? Anyway, that is all I have on this case. I hate him. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Also, this is pre-recorded. I feel so sneaky pre-recording on these videos. When you're watching this, I'm either in Ireland, France, or Italy. So I'm sure I'm going to be blowing up my Instagram with content. So if you want to look at that, feel free, head over. Anyway, love you guys so much and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
13 kids chained to their beds. They were starved, abused, living in filth for years, and somehow nobody noticed. Let's talk about the Turpin family because this was actually breaking my heart. The parents, David and Louise Turpin, he was 23, she was 16 when they got married, which is already a walking red flag. They went on to have 13 kids, ages 2 to 29, and on the outside, they looked like a regular, quiet, religious family. But inside that house, I don't know any other way to explain it other than pure hell. The walls were covered in grime, the air smelled like human waste, there was trash everywhere, mattresses were filled with piss, and the kids were literally chained to their beds with padlocks, sometimes for days, sometimes for months. They were so starved that their arms looked like twigs, and then the grown-up kids looked 12. That is how malnourished they were. They got a shower once a year, and if they had an accident, they would be left sitting in it for hours. Oh, and get this, the fridge, it was fully stocked, but it was locked. The food was there, but they couldn't touch it. And when one of the older kids tried to sneak a bite of food, the parents made them watch as the family cat got mauled to death by wild dogs. Can we all agree that's psychotic as hell? But it gets way worse. They claim to be homeschooling their kids, but they were not teaching them a damn thing. Most of them couldn't spell their own names. Some of them didn't even know what day it was. They weren't allowed to talk to each other, and their parents controlled every single second of their lives. And you're probably thinking, where was CPS? Where were their neighbors? Oh, the neighbors noticed. They said that the kids looked pale, thin, shy, but they just assumed that it was like homeschool awkwardness, and they just kept it pushing. Nobody said a thing. The system never stepped up, not once. Until one day, 17-year-old Jordan and her 13-year-old sister finally escaped. They crawled out of a window, but her little sister got so scared she crawled back inside. But Jordan, she knew that if she did not make it out right now, they were all going to die eventually. And using a phone that she had secretly grabbed from the house, she calls 911. Shaking and terrified, she tells police, "I just ran away from home. My parents are abusing us. They hit us, and 2 of my sisters are chained up right now." Police rush to the house, and when they walk inside, 3 kids are still chained to the beds, and the rest of them are scattered around the house in rooms that reek of death. death. But you think that'd be the end, right? Now that they're finally safe. No, because somehow the system failed them again. They got dumped into foster homes where they were abused again, assaulted again, neglected again. How does that even happen? And the government raised millions in donations to help the Turpin kids rebuild their lives, but they were still broke, still hungry, and still struggling for many years. Where did that money go? And then David and Louise had the audacity to walk into court and say, not guilty. Not guilty? You change your kids to bed. You let them rot in their own filth. And now you're pretending like it's all a big misunderstanding. Luckily, they eventually took a plea deal, but not because they felt sorry, not because they felt bad. It was because they wanted to avoid their kids being able to testify. And what did they get? 25 to life, but guess what? They can apply for parole in 25 years. And if either of them ever walks free, this country has failed us again.
How was this woman savagely murdered in broad daylight while on a busy train to London, and yet no one saw anything and no one heard anything? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Debbie Lindsley. On the 20th of October 1961, Marguerite and Arthur Lindsley welcomed their baby girl into the world, Deborah Ann Lindsley, who went by Debbie. Debbie was bright, bold and ambitious, and she wasn't afraid to get herself out there and grab every opportunity with two hands. She knew what she wanted to do, and she was going to do everything in her power to work hard and to get there. By the time she was 26, she had moved out of the family home in Bromley, South London, up to Edinburgh, where she worked as a hotel receptionist. In March 1988, she was back in Bromley for a couple of days as she was going to be going into central London to attend a course so that she could apply for the role of the manager of a hotel. The staff on this course were actually so impressed with Debbie that they offered her the job, and she was elated. At this moment in her life, Debbie had so much to look forward to. She'd just gotten this new job, which meant she was going to be moving back to London, and she was so excited that in only 2 weeks' time, she was going to be the bridesmaid at her brother Gordon's wedding. She was going to be wearing the most beautiful blue dress with big puffy sleeves, and she couldn't wait. On the 23rd of March 1988, Debbie and Gordon ate some dinner together while watching Neighbours before Gordon dropped her off at the train station. She had to go back into central London in order to get a train up to Edinburgh, and she thought that while she was in the centre, she wanted to go have a little walk around the hotel that she was going to be managing soon. Wanting to make a good first impression, she got all dressed up wearing a blue shirt and skirt set paired with a black leather jacket. Gordon dropped Debbie off at Pettswood Station and she boarded the 2:16 train heading to London Victoria. She sat in the second carriage in a closed 6-person compartment. Now you'll have to bear with us when I try and explain this here, because at first I found this confusing as well. So this train wasn't set out how trains are today, where everyone is kind of in the same compartment and there's a long walkway in the middle. Some of the compartments were like that in other parts of this train, but because Debbie was a smoker, she came to the closed compartment because she was allowed to smoke in there. And she did. She had at least one cigarette. So in order to get on and off the train, you literally walk through one door. So she would have walked off the platform through the door and was straight inside the compartment. There was no corridor, no other seating, nothing like that. This meant that Debbie had nowhere to run when she was savagely attacked. When the train arrived at London Victoria, just over half an hour after Debbie boarded, a porter who was checking each of the carriages to see if there was any luggage left behind, any rubbish, stuff like that, he would come across the body of 26-year-old Debbie Lindsley. She was laid on the floor of the carriage in a pool of her own blood. She had been stabbed at least 11 times, sustaining wounds across her face, neck and abdomen. She also had extensive defensive wounds across her hands, showing that she had fought for her life against her attacker, and it was proven that she had really given a good fight because she managed to severely injure him as well. We know this because some of the killer's own blood was mixed in with the blood that Debbie was found lay in. It was determined that the killer had used a heavy bladed object. It was between 5 and 7 inches in length, and Scotland Yard believed that this was a sexually motivated attack. Police managed to interview around about 70 people who were on the train, and all of them, apart from one, said that they didn't hear or see a single thing. They didn't hear a woman being sadistically murdered and fighting for her life. The only person who was able to give the police anything was a French woman. She was in London working as an au pair, and she was in the carriage next door to Debbie. She told officers that after the train left Brixton and began making its way to its final stop in Victoria, she heard a woman's blood-curdling screams coming from the carriage next door, and that went on for around about 2 minutes. The French woman did say that she thought about pulling on the emergency cord, but after hearing the screaming, she was frozen in shock. When the train arrived at Victoria and she got off, she peered over to the carriage next to her, where the screaming had come from, and that is when she saw a red-headed man get out of the carriage. She went on to follow him through the train station, before eventually losing him. That man has never been identified. Because Debbie had fought back for her life and seriously injured her attacker, police were able to obtain a full DNA profile from blood that he left behind at the scene. However, unfortunately, even to this day, there has never been a match for him on the database. Not a direct match or even a familial match, meaning that he has either never been in trouble with the police since committing this murder, or that he may have left the country. Deborah Lindsley would go on to be buried in the beautiful blue bridesmaid's dress that she was so excited to wear. Both of her parents have since passed before seeing any justice brought for their daughter. There is a £20,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest.